Throughout human history, our capacity for organized violence has led to catastrophes that defy comprehension. The conflicts you're about to hear about aren't just battles. They're cataclysms that swallowed millions of lives and reshaped entire civilizations. While some names on this list might sound familiar, others have been largely forgotten despite their staggering death tolls. What makes a war truly worse than others? Is it the sheer number of casualties? The brutality employed? Or perhaps the lasting scars left on our collective consciousness? By any measure, these 10 conflicts represent the darkest chapters of human history. The scale of destruction in these wars is almost impossible to grasp. In some cases, entire regions lost a third or even half of their population. Advanced civilizations crumbled, technologies of killing evolved to terrifying efficiency, and the rules of warfare were repeatedly rewritten in blood. And perhaps most disturbing of all, some of these conflicts have been largely erased from our common understanding of history despite their apocalyptic scale. Let's begin with number 10. The Taiping Rebellion tore through China from 1850 to 1864, claiming anywhere from 20 to 30 million lives, making it deadlier than World War I. What started as a religious movement led by Hong Xiuquan, who believed himself to be Jesus Christ's younger brother, evolved into one of history's bloodiest civil wars. The conflict erupted during a period of severe famine and economic hardship under the ruling Qing dynasty. Rebel forces captured Nanjing and established their heavenly kingdom before imperial forces, aided by Western powers, finally crushed the rebellion. The death toll was catastrophic. Entire cities were massacred, and some provinces lost half their population. Despite its massive scale and death count, this conflict remains surprisingly unknown in Western education, overshadowed by European wars with far fewer casualties. But that devastation pales in comparison to what happened during the 30 Years' War. Between 1618 and 1648, Central Europe became a charnel house as religious tensions between Protestants and Catholics spiraled into a multi-nation conflict. An estimated 8 million people died, not just from combat, but from disease and famine that swept through devastated regions. In some German states, the population dropped by an almost unbelievable 60%. Entire villages disappeared forever as armies crisscrossed the continent, leaving destruction in their wake. The fighting was so brutal that it fundamentally changed how European powers approached diplomacy, leading to the Peace of Westphalia, which established concepts of state sovereignty still recognized today. The war's brutality shocked contemporaries. Mercenary armies routinely tortured civilians, burned crops, and poisoned wells, creating a humanitarian catastrophe that would take generations to recover from. The conflicts we've discussed so far were concentrated in specific regions, but our number 8 spot goes to a war that engulfed nearly all of Asia and parts of Eastern Europe. The Mongol Conquests under Genghis Khan and his successors between 1206 and 1368 may have killed as many as 60 million people, an almost inconceivable 11% of the world's population at that time. The Mongol armies were known for offering a simple choice to cities in their path: surrender immediately or face complete annihilation. Those who resisted often saw their entire population slaughtered: men, women, and children. In some regions like Iran and parts of Central Asia, population levels didn't recover to pre-invasion levels until the 20th century, 600 years later. Perhaps most disturbing was the environmental impact. Areas that had been agricultural centers for thousands of years were so thoroughly destroyed that forests regrew over once fertile farmland. At number 7 is a conflict most people have never heard of, despite being one of the deadliest wars in human history. The Lushan Rebellion against China's Tang dynasty lasted from 755 to 763 CE and resulted in an estimated 13 to 36 million deaths, potentially wiping out 2/3 of the empire's tax base and around 15% of the entire world population. What began as a military uprising led by General Lushan spiraled into nearly a decade of brutal warfare across what was then the world's most advanced civilization. The Tang dynasty never fully recovered from this catastrophe. The capital city of Chang'an, then the largest and most sophisticated city in the world, was sacked multiple times. The rebellion's aftermath triggered massive demographic changes as millions fled the Central Plains, reshaping Chinese culture and society for centuries to come. The next conflict on our list brought warfare to an unprecedented continental scale. The Napoleonic Wars from 1803 to 1815 transformed Europe into a massive battlefield, with over 5 million deaths in just over a decade. Napoleon's Grande Armée revolutionized warfare with its organizational structure and tactics, but the human cost was enormous. The disastrous Russian campaign alone resulted in nearly 500,000 French casualties. with some units suffering 95% losses. What made these wars particularly devastating was their totality. They weren't just fought between professional armies, but increasingly involved entire societies. Economic warfare, propaganda, and national conscription all emerged as features of modern conflict. Perhaps most chilling was how the Napoleonic Wars normalized mass casualties. Battles with tens of thousands of deaths became accepted as the cost of imperial ambitions. The second half of our list brings us to more recent conflicts, beginning with number 5. The Vietnam War raged from 1955 to 1975, claiming between 1.5 and 3.5 million lives, with civilians accounting for a shocking proportion of casualties. What makes this conflict particularly horrific was its asymmetric nature and the introduction of chemical warfare on an unprecedented scale. The United States dropped more than 7.5 million tons of bombs, more than all explosives used in World War II combined, on Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. Agent Orange defoliant contaminated vast regions, causing birth defects and health problems that continue to this day. The psychological impact was equally devastating. The war introduced terms like post-traumatic stress disorder into our vocabulary and fundamentally changed how we understand combat's mental toll. Meanwhile, horrific massacres of civilians occurred on all sides, with atrocities like the My Lai incident revealing the moral collapse that accompanies prolonged, irregular warfare. At number 4 is what was once called the War to End All Wars, a tragically ironic title given what followed. World War I introduced industrialized slaughter to the battlefield between 1914 and 1918, with nearly 20 million deaths and another 23 million wounded. What makes this conflict particularly devastating was how it combined 19th century tactics with 20th century technology, creating a perfect storm of carnage. On the first day of the Battle of the Somme alone, the British suffered nearly 60,000 casualties. New weapons like machine guns, poison gas, flamethrowers, and tanks made the battlefield uniquely lethal. More disturbing was how the war shattered European civilization's self-image as the pinnacle of human progress. An entire generation of young men was virtually erased. In France, nearly 1 in 5 men of military age died, creating a demographic wound that never fully healed and setting the stage for an even greater catastrophe to come. Our third worst war is one that rarely appears in Western history books despite its apocalyptic scale. The conquests of Timur, also known as Tamerlane, from 1370 to 1405 may have caused the deaths of 17 million people, an estimated 5% of the world's population. What distinguishes Timur's campaigns was their singular brutality. His forces were known for building literal pyramids of human skulls outside conquered cities as psychological warfare. In Isfahan, he ordered the construction of towers containing the heads of 70,000 citizens. His conquest of Delhi reportedly left the city uninhabited for months. Timur's campaigns across Central Asia, the Middle East, and India were so devastating that some regions took centuries to recover their pre-war population levels. His particular brand of warfare aimed not just at military victory, but at shattering the psychological will of entire civilizations through demonstrations of almost unimaginable cruelty. The second spot on our list goes to a theater of World War II that receives far less attention than it deserves. The Second Sino-Japanese War and broader Pacific War from 1937 to 1945 saw levels of brutality that shocked the conscience even by the standards of World War. An estimated 14 to 20 million Chinese civilians died during the Japanese occupation, with infamous atrocities like the rape of Nanking, where up to 300,000 civilians were massacred in a 6-week period. Japanese Unit 731 conducted horrific biological experiments on live prisoners, while millions of others were used as forced labor under conditions that amounted to a death sentence. Throughout occupied territories, the practice of taking comfort women, sexual slaves for Japanese soldiers, left deep wounds across Asian societies. The conflict's brutality extended to Allied POWs, who were subjected to treatment that violated all international norms, with death rates in Japanese camps reaching 27% compared to 4% in German camps. And finally, we arrive at number 1. A conflict so catastrophic it redefined humanity's understanding of its own capacity for destruction. World War II, from 1939 to 1945, directly claimed at least 75 million lives, about 3% of the world's population, and fundamentally reshaped global civilization. What made this conflict uniquely horrific wasn't just its scale, but its nature. The deliberate targeting of civilian populations became standard practice, from the London Blitz to the firebombing of Dresden and Tokyo. The Holocaust represented genocide industrialized to an unprecedented degree, with death camps processing thousands of victims daily. The development and use of atomic weapons at Hiroshima and Nagasaki opened a terrifying new chapter in human conflict. Perhaps most disturbing was how the war normalized mass death. Strategic planners calculated acceptable casualty rates in the hundreds of thousands, a scale that would have been unthinkable a generation earlier. Looking across these 10 conflicts, disturbing patterns emerge. Each war introduced new technologies or methods of killing. Each saw civilian populations increasingly targeted, and each left scars that persisted long after the fighting ended. More troubling still is how many of these catastrophic events have been largely forgotten or minimized in our collective memory, despite their staggering human cost. As weapons technology continues to advance at an exponential rate, one has to wonder, if these wars represent the worst humanity has experienced so far, what unimaginable forms of conflict might the future hold? And perhaps more importantly, what can we learn from these dark chapters to prevent history from repeating itself on an even more devastating scale? If you like this video, please give it a like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below.